Star Wars 7x7, episode 2505. So let's talk about these inhibitor chips, because the more we learn about them, the inhibitor chips that are installed in all of the clones, the more we learn about the variables that they produce. And I will explain what I mean. Punch it. Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy. And thank you so much for joining me for it. So, the inhibitor chips that are installed in the clones. Let's go back for a little bit of history into the Lost Missions episode of the Clone Wars. That's season 6, the season that was released on Netflix, and the 4-part story arc where we find out exactly how it is that the clones are being controlled. It is with this microscopic inhibitor chip that is implanted into the clones' brains during a stage of their development. One of them starts to malfunction in a clone trooper who goes by the nickname Tup, and he unfortunately just kind of loses his mind and starts going, good soldiers follow orders, good soldiers follow orders, and kills a Jedi. And it turns out that apparently his inhibitor chip was rotting, and by doing that, it was causing problems with his mental faculties, and ultimately was probably a cause of his death. And so this becomes the basis of our understanding of these inhibitor chips and how they work, or what happens when they fail. And it certainly seems like failure in these inhibitor chips is a relatively rare situation, because this is the first time that we, as viewers of any Clone Wars stories, of any clone storytelling, this is the first time that we hear about something like that happening. And this is well into the Clone Wars. Like, we are toward the end of the Clone Wars by this point, so certainly that's been going on for a couple of years. But then there's also the issue of the fact that these clones have been in development for quite a long time. At least, the initial batches of clones were, right? And so, I mean, I suppose it's possible that before the Jedi found out about the clones being made on Kamino, that they could have had some issues with them here and there and just were able to silence them and it was no big deal. But still, exceedingly rare situation. But then when it comes to the Bad Batch, well, we see yet another variable on that situation, where 3 of the members of the Bad Batch, and that would be Hunter and Wrecker and Tech, were seemingly unaffected by the Order 66 programming launch, right? And so it suggests that whatever their genetic enhancements, modifications, malfunctions, defects, however you want to call it, whatever their situation was, it deactivated that inhibitor chip in them. Or at least the presumption is that they do have inhibitor chips in them, and they're not working because Crosshair has an inhibitor chip in him, and it is working. So, in this particular case, not only do the inhibitor chips not work in the other members of the Bad Batch, but whatever state they're in are not causing problems with the brains of the Bad Batch, right? Not like Tup, where when his malfunctioned, he started going wacky. That hasn't happened with any of the members of the Bad Batch. And I think what we're being set up for so far is that it's not going to happen with them. And as for Omega, well, we have no idea whether she had an inhibitor chip put into her, so, that's still an open question. But we got answers to the Bad Batch for the first episode of the season. Now we have a new bit of information with the Cut and Run episode, and Cut Lawquane, who was a clone deserter, and yet he didn't get up out of his, farming hut in the middle of nowhere on Saleucami and decide to go, see if there were any Jedi kicking around on the planet and try to shoot them. No, he seems also to be completely unaffected by the inhibitor chip that would otherwise have triggered him to go all Order 66 on everyone. And so I think the implication from that is that his inhibitor chip must have been defective as well, especially when you consider the fact that the whole point of the inhibitor chips was to make the clones, docile and obedient on the one hand, but also to be committed to fighting, committed to being a soldier, and certainly Cut did not have that, especially not with what happened to him and deciding to, run away from the clones. And it wasn't just a matter of trying to save himself so that they could get back into the fight later. No, he was out of the fight entirely. And so that suggests that the programming just didn't take. And that also suggests that, maybe the inhibitor chip that they put in, like, it's not just about Order 66, it's also about, keeping these clones acting in a certain way, and it had failed from the get-go with someone like Cut. And I think you do get the idea over the course of the Clone Wars series that there have been other deserters here and there, but it seems like it's also kind of a rare thing, and we don't get to meet a lot of them, but they must be out there, and so there must be some sort of noticeable failure rate among these inhibitor chips, and that means that not everybody is going to go crazy on this, and not everybody is going to die because of a failing inhibitor chip either. Meanwhile, going entirely in the other direction, we learn that these inhibitor chips can also be enhanced. The effects of these can also be enhanced, as we see with Crosshair, who is put back on the table in the medical bay on Kamino, and who knows what it is that they do to him exactly, but whatever it is, it essentially amplifies the effects of the inhibitor chip. And it was already kind of malfunctioning with Crosshair to some degree because, for example, when we saw the effects of Order 66 in Clone Wars Season 7, right? And we saw the clone troopers deciding that they were going to go after Rex. They were going to kill him. Well, Crosshair didn't necessarily decide that he was going to go after Hunter and kill Hunter because Hunter wasn't obeying Order 66, but certainly he was not happy with his place in the chain of command and thinking that there was some trouble afoot with Hunter and the fact that he wasn't obeying Order 66. And so that was causing a bit of a problem, but Crosshair was not as, gung-ho about it and going to the degree of, you're not following this order, therefore I have to kill you, right? He wasn't that intense about it. But it seems like the process on Kamino that he underwent made him that intense, and possibly even more so. So these clones can have their inhibitor chip effects heightened even more so. And this is going to become maybe an interesting experiment for the Empire, because they're already talking about discontinuing the clone situation and looking at conscripts for their foot soldiers instead of the clones. But the cloners on Kamino are kind of fascinated by the possibility of, oh, we can zap these guys and they'll be even more obedient. What does that mean? So that opens up the potential for more conflict and drama later on in the Bad Batch. But that's basically, I think, in a nutshell, what we know about the inhibitor chip situation now, which is a lot more just by these 2 episodes of the Bad Batch than we knew previously, which is very cool, I think, and I hope you think so too. So, if there's anything I've missed about these inhibitor chips that you think is worth chatting about, then by all means, drop a comment on Facebook, on Twitter, on Homebase for the show at SW7x7.com, on YouTube for the show, wherever you like. I'd love to hear it. And that is going to do it for today's episode of the show. It just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for it, as always. And may the Force be with you, wherever in the world you may be.
Star Wars 7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2021 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.